210 shillings billion tax fight, and that has to do with this extended suspension of the 2023 Finance Act. On the ticker, IMF seeks tighter controls on Kenya borrowed cash. The Central Bank of Kenya Act is set to be amended in changes meant to tighten the use of borrowed funds, the World Bank has revealed, as the country comes to terms with disclosures by the Auditor General that Kenya does not have audited financial statements on public debt. MPs save farms from paying interns. Footing health bills. Employers have been spared from mandatory hiring and paying of interns and offering them insurance after a parliamentary committee thwarted a push by the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Aisha Jumwa. Safaricom adds 675 new jobs after Ethiopia entry. Safaricom added 675 jobs in the year to March, many of them being in its Ethiopian subsidiary that went into full operation during the period. Okay, so that is the Business Daily front page of the Taifa Leo. We have the Chief Justice, Martha Koome. Jaji Atupia Koome. Kiazi moto. Is that a potato? Hot potato, I imagine, is what it translates to. Macho ya Wakenya sasa ni kwa Jaji Mkuu Martha Koome anayetarajiwa kupokea faili ya kesi kuhusu sheria ya fedha ya mwaka 2023. Siwezi kusitisha agizo niliotoa Juni 30 nikipiga breki wananchi kutozwa ushuru mpya. Nikifanya hivyo utakuwa ubatili. So that is a quote from Judge Mugure Thande. On the front page here, that image of Raila Odinga again in a bus. Baba ingia jijini, ghafla kwa matatu. So that is essentially the front page of Taifa Leo. I see an image here of Ali Hassan Joho. ODM Pwani ni kibogoyo bila Hassan Joho. Viongozi wa eneo la Pwani wadaiwa kutohudhuria maandamano bila Joho. I'm sure there is a story there. I'll leave it to the political analysts. Front page of the Standard. I will have to renew my subscription there. So let's take a look at the Star first. CS Kindiki and police chiefs divided over Raila protests. Grumbles after minister tells cops to assess demos before responses. And Raila ups drive to 15 million signatures, readies for Wednesday demos. Also on the front page of the Star, an image here of President William Ruto, his Ethiopian counterpart, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, under an umbrella. Unconditional ceasefire is what it's been captioned. This is them after an IGAD meeting in Sudan. Ruto tells warring Sudan factions to stop their fighting. Setback to Uhuru as tribunal ratifies Kega Jubilee job. People Daily. Costly loans to hard borrowers. Banks have already warned hundreds of thousands of their customers and small businesses that they will pay higher interest starting today. SACCO seek to caution by enticing those burdened to transfer expensive loans. An image of Raila Odinga, and this is what outside City Hall. Raila Kindiki face-off over demo. Confrontation looms after Interior CS warns Azimio leader against leading protests in Nairobi tomorrow, just hours after Raila held surprise rally in the CBD. Did it qualify as a rally, I suppose is the question. Relief for contractors as ministry orders 2.5 billion shillings payout for CBC classes. Director of Secondary Education, Paul Kibet, says the money will be sent to each school where classrooms were built, and they will then pay the builders. So front page there, again, I see an image of the Treasury CS. On the other side is Okiom Tata. Right at the center is Judge Mugure Thande, who declined as of yesterday to lift the freeze on the Finance Act. And she asked the Chief Justice to constitute a 3-judge bench. As for the Standard, allow me to refer to my hard copy this morning. Raila's 15 million signature puzzle. Azimio leaders will today launch the collection of millions of signatures from Kenyans who express discontent with the government. However, opinion is split on what follows after the exercise is complete. Several images of him here. One in the matatu. I see Wycliffe Oparanya also there. The other is of him buying newspapers, and the other is of him walking. So this is him walking to go pick that matatu in Karen. And yeah, I will leave it there, reintroduce my panelists, and we will get into the topic of conversation this morning. Again, if you have just joined, bear with me. I want to make sure we are all on the same page. Esther Pasaris, Woman Rep Nairobi, joining us from Abidjan virtually, and Murada, Woman Rep Kiambu, Megan White Mukuria, founder Zana Africa Programs, Janet Mugwa, founder Inua Dada Foundation, Lois No, psychologist. We're still waiting on her. We'll find out where she is in a few moments. But first, I'll start with you, Mheshimiwa Murada. You have been very vocal on the issue that has, in the last week, put menstruation center stage and the stigma that surrounds it, as well as the shame associated with it. That is the workers, female workers, on shift at the Browns factory in Tigoni being asked to undress so they could establish who disposed of a sanitary towel in the wrong bin. So you met the owners yesterday.
Yes.
And what were their sentiments on the issue? Did they, express a commitment to ensure this does not happen again?
So first things first, I first went to the court of law in Rimuru to first find out what happened to the workers that had been arrested. And they were released on cash bail of 150,000 each, and were requested to be seeing the DCI every Tuesday and Thursday until their case is heard. So they've been released on a cash bail of 150,000. And after I left the Rimuru courts, now I went to Tigoni Brown factory, and the owners had just flown in. The owners are Kenyans of Western origin, and they came from the US yesterday. And you could imagine now with the kind of the stories that were all over on social media, on CNN, they were so low, and like they were just there not really knowing what else to say or what to do. But they had put everything in place. Because when I went there, there was already a counselor that was taking care of all the staffs, including the men, partners who are working with these ladies. They were already going through therapy, one-on-one counseling, and even the group counseling. They were all getting a therapy over the same because of what had been happening on the social media and also in the media. They had also brought in a private HR to come and check on whether there are other excesses in the company that have not been exposed. And again, they did a written and verbal apology to these ladies. Because what I was trying to check on as the representative of the county is that we wanted to see whether the ladies have been reinstated and unconditionally. But that's exactly what they had done. They had reinstated these other ladies unconditionally.
Have they been suspended or something of the sort?
No, you see now when such things happen, people feel like they are withdrawn, they aren't sure, because now when it was blown all over, they weren't very sure whether they would be reinstated in their jobs. But again, they were assured there's not going to be any stigma over them all over what has happened.
Okay.
And now they are back to their jobs because the company has employed 250 people from around Tigoni. And there was also the idea that the farmers around Tigoni are the ones who provide this company with milk. So we were also trying to look at it in a very dignified manner, because again, we would not want to lose the company because it has employed a lot of locals around there.
All right.
And people, they also provide the milk for the cheese to the company. They were also telling us that after they are done with the production, then the excesses they give to farmers for free, those who rear pigs. So they are a very important company to the people around there. And so we were looking at a situation where we'll be able to settle this amicably with the company without leaving anybody stigmatized. And so we talked with the owners of the company. They were more than willing. We also requested them, for the sake of settling the little scores that were there with the people around there, we requested them maybe to do some sanitary towels to the primary schools around there. They were more than willing. And they are saying this is what they're going to do. And we are expecting to work together with them. They said they wouldn't even mind doing an extra project to the primary schools around there. And so I requested them that anytime soon we're going to visit them with the area MP so that we are able to see what we can be able to do with them to the primary schools. But my request as the woman for Kiambu County was that they do sanitary towels to the primary schools around there and possibly get people to involve them to teach on menstrual hygiene and this work. Because again, we were feeling subjecting these ladies now to another session of menstrual hygiene who are already grown-up women will also continue stigmatizing them again, because it will be like, you bring us back to where it all started, and now we are fully grown. And then we checked on their facility. They have very nice facilities. They have bins for sanitary. The company is very beautiful. Their place is very nice. I think it was just a mistake of an individual that led to all this. But everything is in good place. They are a company that is run properly.
All right. Okay. So, but there was no officially, they were not, the employees in question who you're saying were reinstated were not suspended or
they were not suspended.
Or anything.
It's only that issue of feeling like, you see,
you're not certain about
not
where you
very
stand.
many people are used to this media thing. So when like these ladies were all over the media, and I didn't think they expected it to go that way. It was all over in social media, on main media, and to them it was something that was really putting them down and making them feel like they will lose their job. But the company has assured them that they're going to keep them in the job and no stigma. They've invited a counselor. I think they would be willing to do all that you would wish them to do for the sake of keeping their company.
Okay, thank you very much, Mweshimiwa. I was on Google yesterday, Janet, and I saw that in the last financial year, you had raised concern about the budget for sanitary towels allocated. The monies allocated to the Ministry of Education to undertake that exercise was slashed from, was it from 470 million to 260. And I was trying to figure out, okay, so in this financial act, this finance act that has been suspended, what is the allocation? And I came across the budget statement. The proposal was 940 million. But Mweshimiwa Pasaris, can you tell us, if you're certain, what the budget that was passed is for sanitary? Are you aware of, are you certain of those figures of how much was allocated for sanitary towels in this budget?
Okay, first of all, I mean, the thing is, we've always cried as women reps and women leaders that the money that they've kept for sanitary towels was very, very inadequate. And the law actually provides sanitary towels only to public schools. And we know that we've got children that are going to community-based schools, which are the majority, and faith-based schools. So we needed actually to triple the budget so that we can cater for community-based, we can cater for faith-based and public schools. So I believe that that is something that was taken into account, because that was part of also the public participation that was done, that we need to up the budget to cater for these two sectors, and of course change the law so that we can actually cater for community and faith-based schools, because right now it's strictly public schools. And then, of course, the women reps, their funding is so little, but we managed to get 1 billion shillings added to the women reps, and we've also managed to make sure that the sanitary towels budget comes to the women reps through the Ministry of Gender. And with that, we are hoping that we would be able to then ensure that there's fairness. And there's also strict families that need to be provided with sanitary towels who are not school-going, but need to have access to dignified menstruation.
All right. So do I understand you correctly when you say what you're looking for is the monies to be allocated to the woman reps who would then undertake the exercise of distributing the sanitary towels? Is that what you? That's what I understood you to say.
What happened is the budget for the budget for sanitary towels has been moving between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Gender.
Okay.
And because women reps are always the ones being asked, the women reps have always been asked, where is the sanitary towels, when they don't get it. During the period of COVID, I even brought a question to the floor of the House asking the late Magoha what happened during the COVID period when the children were at home. And he said that the children were provided with sanitary towels in January, but our fact findings showed that the children did not get sanitary towels during that period for the entire year. So as women reps, because we're always being asked what's happening with sanitary towels, and we use the little budget that we have to cushion the areas that the government did not provide, we actually went and, when we met with the executive, we actually asked for sanitary towels to be taken back to gender. And it was taken back to gender. So it will be under the umbrella of the women reps, together with our additional GAF money. We're hoping that we will be able to now bridge the gaps and make sure sanitary towels is available to every child without discrimination, not just public going schools, but even community-based and faith-based.
All right. Is a complication presented by the fact that it's the Basic Education Act, I believe it is Section 39K, that provides that the Cabinet Secretary will ensure that in public-private, that sanitary towels are made available in public primary schools. Does it present a complication that it falls in the Basic Education Act and the monies would then go to the Ministry of Gender, or was that resolved?
No. I think we're amending that particular aspect of the law so that it actually goes back to gender. It used to be with gender. It moved to education. And the question is, we need to expand it. Wherever it will be anchored, it needs to be expanded to not discriminate any girl that requires sanitary towels.
All right. Understood. But clearly, Janet and Megan, you wouldn't be in this space if there wasn't a gap. 65%, I read somewhere, and this was an AMREF statement released in February, that 65% of women and girls in Kenya cannot afford sanitary towels, that up to 1 million schoolgirls miss up to 20% of the school year on account of not having access to sanitary towels. The legislation provides for provision, at least where public primary school is concerned. Kenya, I read in 2004, lifted the VAT on sanitary towels. But why, in your view, in your experience, because you're the ones who are ground, does this gap remain? Janet?
Yeah, I was just going to say qua ground. And
yes.
you finished the words. For me, it's a very different situation. We're at an interesting intersection now, I think, with menstrual justice, where people are finally beginning to see the injustice just based on what, our leaders have said and what she said about what happened at Brown's. I'm sure for Megan, because she's been in the space even longer than I have, it's great to see the progress. It's still very disappointing to see the pushback. The two are dancing very delicately together. So when it comes to, I think that one of the biggest issues is coordination and implementation. When it comes to, yes, you've got great laws, and Kenya is a poster child for great policies. Implementation, coordination, civic education, that's where there's a huge gap. You have goodwill, but when it comes to actually rolling out and accountability and following through, that's completely lacking. And to Mheshimiwa Pasaris's point, it's changed docket so much, this particular issue on menstrual health, gender, then education, and then health, and going back and forth. And I think for me, one of the biggest disappointments, or what I always feel at the heart of it all, is that there's a disregard and deprioritization of how important this issue is. And until we break through that, until we're able to say women and girls' rights are as important as everyone else, until we're able to say menstrual injustice actually affects people's lives, it affects education, it affects your ability to compete and show up like the rest of the population, it affects your ability to work, like what we saw that happened at Brown's Cheese. But there is this kind of deprioritization. It's starting to be prioritized again. I just hope it's not a trend and a bandwagon that people are jumping on, which I think we've seen happen many times. Something kind of comes up and creates all this uproar, and everyone kind of rallies together. What we're lacking is a coordinated approach, a coordinated sort of like coalition, which Megan will mention a little bit, which is in the works right now. It's thinking through how do we actually create a group that is able to hold government accountable when they say we are allocating, that is able to monitor distribution, that is able to also push for education at the workplace, at the community level, across the board, because people always think it's a certain demographic that doesn't know. You'd be surprised. So many people who are very educated or well-traveled or well-versed still hold a lot of stigma and issues against women and periods. So there has to be a holistic approach. There has to be a coordinating body. There has to be a body that coordinates, follows through, there's accountability, and there has to be consistency. We can't be making noise whenever there's an issue, celebrating Menstrual Hygiene Day, Day of the Girl, and in between there's a lull. There has to be full-on intentionality and consistency, accountability, and overall coordination. In the last 9 or so years that I've been in this space, those are the biggest gaps I've seen. So hopefully, I think we're turning a corner. I really do. Because now people are saying enough, but I hope we can hold on to that energy even when you feel like you just want to let it go, because it's a hard fight. But I think that's where we are, but yeah.
Okay. Megan, a lot of people would be tempted to say, hini mambo ya wanawake, and then, you know, they'll change the channel and maybe look for some politics. But why does this conversation matter? You have been in this space for some time. Why does this matter?
The world needs women to be in leadership positions, right? We know that. Menstruation is just the moment, the onset of menstruation is the moment when girls become women and when all of that negativity against women starts, right? So we can't talk about menstruation and stigma about menstruation without talking about all the other stigmas and barriers that women face. This one's easier. You know, in our 2-year randomized control trial in Khalifi, we found that it was actually pretty easy to break period stigma and to break taboos, right? Girls would be able to play sports when they thought that they couldn't. Then their cramps feel better, God didn't smite them, the world didn't end, and they really understand social norms and understand human rights. And what we have is a challenge with social norms, right? Women and men protect social norms, even if they're harmful, right? And that's why you see women ganging up against girls and against other women around menstruation, because it's going against the social norm, right? So if girls in Khalifi and boys can change their menstrual norms very quickly to understand menstrual norms versus human rights, now the challenge is for us as adults how to do that. And so I think it's vital because we have a rising generation. Half of Kenya is under 19 years old, right? 1 in 4 people on the planet is going to be an African adolescent by 2050, right? If we don't inculcate gender equality into this generation and we don't live it ourselves in our generation, we are going to have a very difficult situation in our hands. But we are at the cusp of that. And Kenya, since 2004, as you said, has been a leader in this. The women MPs were the first to, waive value-added tax in the world. I launched the National Sanitary Towels campaign in 2006, right? Kenya was the first to write pads into budgets in 2008, and they used to include panties, which I just have to mention, girls need. You can't use a pad if you don't have an underpant, right? Kenya continues to be the forefront. I can go on and on all the different things that Kenya's done. Yeah. And now, as Janet said, we really need to come together and execute this well. And we've been in conversation around starting a menstrual health coalition with several leaders, former government, former just leaders in different areas, to really do exactly what we've been talking about so that we can seize this moment and make it matter. I mean, in 2013, I launched a mobile app to coordinate national pad distribution, but Kenya just wasn't ready for it, right? But what would it look like if we actually came together, if government pads that were distributed were documented and there was transparency to the girl, because there's never been transparency to the girl, right? And then all the other well-wishers map all of their schools and we cover the whole nation together, because the government does have an important role, but they're not the only actors, and we have to do that national coordination, and I think the time is now.
All right. We have Lois Doe in studio now. And Lois, I have a lot of questions for you, including on the social norms, because yesterday I was in the supermarket buying a pack of pads, and I was shy about it because it's like, okay, who's seen me? I went to the counter and it was a man, and I was like, hey, they don't have newspapers to wrap it. You know what I mean? Because you don't want it showing through your shopping bag, although now we have renewable ones, so, there's less chance of that. But that is me. I am educated. I'm employed. I'm above 30, and I still feel like this is a hush-hush subject matter. But before we get into that, I'm just curious what you made of the events in Tigoni. I know for a lot of people, they were surprised that it was female managers who would require other women to strip. You would imagine that there would be empathy, and even in 2019, remember there was the national outcry over the girl who reportedly committed suicide in Bomet over being shamed by her female teacher. So at least for me, I'm like, wouldn't she understand why? I don't know. Is it a surprise to you, or is it just me?
Thank you, Olive. I think coming from when the issue came up and I listened to it, many times because of the injustices like what we're saying about women and against women, you find that we use the very same issue as a tool to be able to speak out and say what we want to say or expose what we want to expose. Because my first question was, there must be designated places really for any of these disposals to be done. And maybe there could be a statement that these ladies wanted to make, although it could have gone overboard.
Although Mheshimiwa has told us they have the facilities.
Yes. Yeah, so if they have the facilities, so if the truth is that it was placed in a different place, then just like I said, sometimes we use certain things to make a statement when there are injustices. Because I didn't quite understand what it would have taken for someone to place that used pad in a different place to agitate the managers to that level. And then again, coming from a psychological point of view, and like you've said, you'd expect a fellow woman to understand, even if it was as frustrating or as annoying. But getting to, I think every other time we talk about when you expose the dignity of a person to a certain level, you actually deprive them of any honor and respect, and they are bound to basically hit back in the most sometimes unexpected ways. And so that's what I was making of that kind of scenario. It's sort of like organizational politics, organizational psychology, and the women using whatever they can to be able to make a statement. I remember when in school, and particularly in the university, the issue of throwing any litter was extremely, it was impossible, and a fine of 2,000 was slammed on somebody. But if we wanted to make a statement, somebody would just throw something on the street, on the pavement, and then the whole university would be up in arms.
All right, so perhaps it's good that they have a counselor on board who can work through all of that. We continue with this conversation on the other side of this break, but some of it, I suppose, is because women on their menses are considered unclean. Your thoughts at NTV Kenya at Obaros.
Victor called me.
Oh, really? What did that con artist have to say?
He admitted his bluff. He said he lied. I couldn't imagine he could lie about that.
He's capable of much worse. Why are you torturing me? Why don't you just expose me right here, right now?
I don't know, maybe next episode.
Is that a threat?
No, it's a warning. I called Victor, but he hasn't picked up. Do you know where he is?
How would I know?
Je, mwanaume ni nani? Mwanaume ni mtu ambaye anaweza kubroadcast message ya I love you. Kwa sababu kila mtu in the contact list ni demu wake. Mwanaume ni mtu ambaye
To get Mwanaume ni Nani as your Skiza tune, dial *812 *798#.
Skiza, Nan Nation. Do not hold back in any situation. Eno gets to work on the 6 symptoms of heartburn fast.
You do know you said all of that out loud, right?
If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
what did you put in my shirt?
toss of lavender, and a world of freshness.
Wash your clothes with Toss Lavender to leave your clothes with a lasting, irresistible freshness.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. We're discussing this. It is not unclean, period. Menstruation is natural and dignity is a right. This is a human rights issue, as I'm sure Megan will explain to us in not too long. But first, Mheshimiwa Muratha, I don't want to use the term relegating, but in assigning these funds to the Ministry of Gender, in having women reps take up this cause, are we then making this family, what is this word? Making this a women's issue as opposed to a national issue?
Either way, I think when we're trying to run back and forth, because it's like we've never, as a nation, much as there are so many people who've tried sensitizing the whole country, the likes of Janet, who've tried sensitizing the country to own the whole project like a national issue. It's like, from where we are coming from, the taboo and things we don't talk about in our families, it's like it's left to women to deal with it. But again, the women that are supposed to also front it, I also like feeling it's not something to really come fronting openly, just as you have said. Even when you go and buy the sanitary pads in the supermarket, you want them wrapped completely so that you're not seen carrying such things, because it's still a taboo when you're seen doing such things. So it's like, it's a high time as a nation, we picked it as a national issue, because like now, when I went to Tigoni, when they were giving the counseling, the counselor that is already there on the ground is counseling both the men and the women. And you realize the men were also traumatized by the whole issue when they saw it happening. And being fathers and the brothers to the women, I think as you are asking, it needs to be embraced as a national issue, where like when we speak about it in Parliament, it's not looked at by parliamentarians like a women issue. Let the 47 women plus the other constituency women MPs talk about it. But if every one of us comes on board and speaks about it, and I don't know how we also go about it, because right now in the gender office, the CS is a woman, the PS is a woman. We have 47 women in Parliament for the counties, and about 20-something for constituencies. And so we realize with that kind of a voice, if these women front it now, like it just has to happen now, it has to be a negotiation that has to be done, both in the Senate, in the Parliament, in the county assemblies, and everybody feels it's a high time we also took it as a national issue. Maybe we'd be able to change. But how we go about it, the likes of Janet Mbugua have talked about it for quite some time, and we listen, and we almost are ending it up at, after all, it's women saying to women. So let the women talk. So if we were a listening nation, by now, the many years they've talked about it, we would have embraced it. So I think, I don't know how we do it so that the women can feel we still confronted to these men and make them own it. And they own the idea of speaking it as it is and saying it as it is. And now being in Parliament, also fronting it to the men in Parliament to still feel it's something they can talk. But even when you talk to them, they are also feeling this is the women thing, go talk to the women. Because of where we are coming from. We also go to churches where they feel when you have your periods, you are unclean. You need not to come to church. And there are women who really feel when I'm in my periods, I can't even go to church. Because it's like it's stigmatized and it's like it is wrong. But the irony of it is that these are things we don't even talk about at home. Those of us who grew up in these African homes know that even our mothers never talked about it. They assumed you will learn it from people out there. So when you learn it out there and now you want to come and discuss with her, she has no discussion. You want the money she will give, but the rest of the information you can go and get elsewhere. So I think it's a high time people are now sensitized to embracing it, talk about it at home, talk about it in church, talk about it in our workplace, and it gets open. I don't know which direction the likes of Janet Mbugua takes, because now they have to really push it to people's throats so that everybody now feels it's a high time we do it. Because like when we went to the president and talked about it, he was like, by the way, it needs to be in your offices. Now we need to do it. And we leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then when we go, it's like, it's still not happening. So I don't know at what point we really now say, as a nation, this is now a national conversation, and we just have to speak about it.
You know, Janet is among those who are making it and normalizing conversations around menstruation. But Mheshimiwa Pasaris, the Nairobi governor, Johnson Sakaja, said the Nairobi County Assembly they would budget, essentially, the Nairobi County government would budget for sanitary towels. Have you been involved in that process? Is there some sort of coordination between what the national government is doing, what the county governments are doing, what organizations such as Janet's and Megan's are doing, so that the efforts make sense?
You know, we'll need a multi-sectorial approach so that we don't have an overlap. Like we've seen with our bursaries, we have a lot of overlap where maybe one family would get bursaries across all platforms, from MCA all the way to Women Rep. So we will need a multi-sectorial approach. But the thing is, remember, I even have to commend NTV for your campaign on ending period poverty. At the end of the day, whatever we put in government will not be enough. We need private sector. We need NGOs. We need civil society. I remember at one point when I was trying to supplement the community-based schools, I actually dealt with Zana and got them at a really low price so that I could actually give the students. So we need to have a multi-sectorial approach. We need to have a monitoring and evaluation. We need to make sure we leave no one behind, that everyone has it. And when it comes to, you know, the shame, the societal shame, I mean, I think there was a time when we couldn't even tell our fathers. You know, only our mothers knew, and we thought it was a secret. It was something that was taboo. I really loved the Always campaign when it started, and the girls were dancing about and feeling proud about the fact that they could do their sport and they could go to school, and there was nothing to be ashamed of, being young, being spirited, and having your periods at the same time. We need to make sure that this whole thing that, oh, it's taboo, we can't discuss it, stops, because this is where in the end we don't discuss sanitary towels at home and our girls are being lured, and then we end up with teenage pregnancies as well. So there has to be a conversation where we realize that menstruation is it's a gift from God. It enables a girl to become a woman, to be able to have a child in the future. So you know, we have to actually celebrate this aspect of being a woman. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, and I know that people feel that, oh, we can't even pray when we are on our menstruation. And the biggest danger, you know, we've been talking about the girl-child empowerment and keeping her in school. If a girl misses school because of menstruation, she's missing 20% of her education. And then we're defeating the whole purpose of making sure that we get girls back into school and keeping them in schools. So I think we need a multi-sectorial approach and an issue-based approach where we bring in all the issues, including teenage pregnancies.
All right. And for those who, Janet, perhaps don't know how you got into this space. You know, you have My First Time, you've authored the book, Inua Dada, and people are like, she gave up a TV career. How did it happen?
It actually started in the newsroom. You know, it was actually 10 years ago. I realized that the other day. There was a story where I worked before. There was attention that had been brought to us by a woman who's in Marigat in Baringo County who was talking about this issue of absenteeism, teen pregnancy, even back then. And a lot of it was linked in many ways to not having access to sanitary towels, and they were using unsanitary products. And so he decided to carry the story. And there was such a big push in the newsroom, I remember that. And at the time, the COO said, I can hear all of you, but I'm going to go ahead. And so the story was done by 2 reporters, and then I had a talk show at the time, and I brought it on as a conversation. And I think for many of us, to be quite honest, it was one of the first times we'd interacted with period poverty on that scale. Growing up at the Coast CTC, I'd already seen it and interacted and understood it, but it hadn't quite been mainstreamed in that way before on 9 o'clock primetime news. And that kind of shifted something in me to say, okay, it's 2013 and we're still having these issues. That is completely uncalled for. And so kind of pursuing the conversation and trying to find out. So we did go to Marigat, talk to the girls. There's a feature on it, and using chicken feathers and goat hide and things that you can't really fathom that people use because they don't have pads. And that, I think, just kind of triggered me to follow the conversation. But more than that, to tell the story. So I'm big on storytelling. I feel like when you hear it directly from people, you can't fight a story. A story is the truth of the matter. And that shifted things in many ways. I think at the time, I remember, we're talking about women and allyship. I remember the MPs on ground there were telling us that we stage managed it. They said that we made up the story. And we asked them, what do you mean? Like, why would that be your first reaction when it's in your backyard? And they only kind of changed tune because the former First Lady got involved. So it became this huge conversation because it was all eyes on the screen. And so I just kind of never stopped pursuing and trying to find out, okay, so when does justice come for these girls? Okay, so where's the budgetary allocation? Okay, but they're saying this and you're saying something different. Can we hear it directly from communities? And I guess 10 years later, here I am, still pursuing. And so that's how I got involved. Very passionate about storytelling, very passionate about seeing that you can put something out there and eventually pursue justice and see it come, and then making peace with the fact that this is a long fight. Progress is fragile, and it's for the long term. And it's just something that I don't think I'll ever stop pushing for because, you know, like Megan had said, there's a cusp that we're on right now that combines all these many years of the policies and the breakthroughs. And now there's a lot of advocacy and activism around the issue. And to also what Honorable Pasaris has said about a multi-stakeholder approach, Honorable Murada as well saying that, you know, what's the direction to take? I think now is the time that collectively these voices come together. There's been attempts in the past, but I think there's been a lot of politics and things that you can't explain. But honestly, if not now, then when? And to what Honorable Pasari said, changing cycles, I was telling somebody, this is huge because having a conversation live about menstruation in Kenya, I was like, having been in the space, this is huge. And so kudos as well to the media house for doing it. And I am a big believer in this shifting things somewhat because suddenly you can't escape it. It's right there in front of you. So let's talk about it. And then let's have a holistic approach. Megan talked about social norms. It also has to start with what do we find normal? What are we normalizing? Why are we normalizing shame? How do we begin to unlearn that? So all of that coming together, the storytelling, you're talking about social norms and unlearning them, the budget, the activism, it has a private sector, resourcing, because they have a huge role to play as well. So all of this coming together with government support, if we can turn that tide now, I feel like we're going to be able to do something. If we miss this moment, then that's a shame because we do have a pretty huge moment on our hands, to be honest. So, yeah.
All right.
That's a long answer for how I got involved.
No, it's good, it's good, it's good. Got it. But there's something that Mheshimiwa Pasaris mentioned about Zana Africa. She said she worked with you. In terms, because, you know, we've had so many technological advancements. You've been in this space since 2006, is it? Yeah. So our sanitary towels, given all the technology that has come up, issues of accessibility and affordability are at the center of this conversation. Where are we in that space?
Well, so one of the things that people don't know is COVID made pads more expensive. And the reason they did is that masks, the non-absorbent layer, the protective layer from COVID, is actually the top layer of pads. And the bottom layer of pads is hospital PPEs. So the demand for those products went up tremendously. Global transportation, as we all know, went over 3x, which is one reason why, and the shilling's tanking. None of that helps. So that is why local manufacture is so important. And since I began this process because I'd worked with former street children and was having late night conversations, answering their questions honestly about relationships and safety and health and what's normal. And because the number 2 biggest expense on our budget line every month was sanitary pads, and we didn't even have that many adolescents in 2002. And so I set out to innovate sanitary pads because we have to do better. We have to be more eco-friendly. Because the waste is an issue, we have to produce locally. And so we're the only organization in the world that has 9 different patentable innovations for blended pulps. So we can actually improve agricultural usage, right? Give farmers more money, take those and make them on large-scale commercial machines. We've actually proved out way back in 2013, 2014, that we could run them on African Cotton Industries machines, that they passed Kenya Bureau of Standards, that they passed user tests. And so it's just been a long process of jumping through all the investment hoops in order to now start manufacturing. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities from joint ventures with other local manufacturers. There's a lot of opportunity right now for public-private sector partnerships. And I think this is really the time that Kenya could put another major, flag in the ground and say, we have done this, we're the first in the world, we're solving the problem for the continent and for the rest of the world, and we need to do it together. But so that's the first thing I set out to do, was to figure out how to make pads locally and more cost effectively. And then it's the wraparound reproductive health education on that. Because if you just throw pads at all the girls across Kenya, that'd be great, we should do that. But it's not gonna completely change their world, right? That's why we put reproductive health information on the back of the pad package. We connect them to digital and in-person partners. We just launched our own hotline so that people can call and be able to get honest, rights-based answers and then health referrals, right? Because girls need to know, access, and actualize their full health rights. And all these topics, what's going on down there, it's all stigmatized. It's all tied up in the same issue, right? And so girls have to get urinary tract infections fixed, right? Bacterial vaginosis, all these things that are super common, right? Men have STDs and you don't know it because they don't show anything, right? Girls manifest that, right? And girls are being preyed on by men 5 to 10 years older. Over 10% of transactional sex is just for pads, right? Girls are actually not missing as much school as most people claim because they are engaging in dangerous activities in order to get the pads to stay in school. I was just in Mathare yesterday talking with teen moms. Most of them didn't know about their periods and didn't know how periods connect with sex and with pregnancy, and so they got pregnant, right? Our curriculum that we're working to scale with Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development now is going to solve that problem for Kenyan schoolgirls and boys. So they can go through that whole rite of passage that's gotten lost since colonialism, right? Pre-colonialism, age sets had conversations with age sets, right? And you went through all of this information. And then colonialism came and fractured society, and schools came and were imposed, and people sent, first they sent their most stubborn kids to school, right? And then now it became normal. And so then we outsourced that parenting and outsourced that socialization. And now we need to take that back a bit and say we do need to have these conversations in houses and we do need to have them in schools, but we need to equip the teachers to be able to feel comfortable to answer these questions and to give them the support that they need and to give the companies the support that they need so they can have these conversations. So it starts with the pads, it starts with affordability, it starts with accessibility. NIA, I'm really proud to say, is now being sold in over 36 counties. We have about 120,000 customers a month now and rapidly growing because we designed it for cost efficacy. We take very, very low margins in order to get a socially just price because people are hard hit. It's all over the papers, right? Every day it's hard. And so we said as a company we have to be socially just, and that means we take lower margins. We pay back our investors in a slightly longer period of time so that the average Kenyan can be able to have her menstruation, use pads, and also buy food, also buy maca, also buy all the things that they need for that day. And that's really important, and I think that's why local solutions are so important to invest in, because while multinationals play a role, their first issue is not what can the Kenyan consumer afford and how do I innovate to make that product accessible to them. So, yeah.
All right. If we can please put up the... I don't know what to call it, but the infomercial? Let's just put up what is on my screen, on the screen. And this is to do with changing cycles. You'll see NIA there. You'll see all our other partners, Zana Africa there as well. Binti Pads. So this is the event my panelists are making reference to. Janet will be the keynote speaker. And these will be some of the panelists, including Megan, who's gotten a head start today. But she's been speaking in this space for a long time, so has Janet. Lois, Megan mentioned, who mentioned the Always commercial, the ad?
I think it was Honorable Pasaris.
Oh, yeah, it was Michelle Pasaris, yes. And I remember when we were younger and we had just finished, don't guess my age, watching, I think we were watching for Bold and the Beautiful. And then an Always ad came up, and my nephew is much younger, and he asked, what is that? Like, why are the girls dancing? Because, you know, it was very eye-catching and everything. And we told him it's bread. Why do we find it hard to have these conversations, Lois?
But you know, like has been mentioned by Mheshimiwa, anything to do with sexuality has always and is still a challenge for most people to talk about. In fact, it's just hit me that in my entire, you know, shopping in my family, it's not like I would go and now when I had adult children, that I would go and make it a point to pick sanitary towels if it were not for me and my children were not affording or they were not able. So I'm just looking at it, and we are still a little far from getting out of the stigma, because still, even as we speak now, I get to speak to young people on behalf of their parents, because their parents are not able to speak to them, including, sorry, this weekend, I had a group of teenagers, and you're asking some simple questions like what has been put before, and it's like, no one has told us about that. And it all surrounding sexuality, and particularly for the boy child and menstruation issues. It's like they know nothing about it. They don't even know how people do use these assets or the pads and stuff like that. And therefore, it becomes a real challenge. So I'm just wondering, where does the conversation need to be pushed? Maybe beginning from the families and the entire awareness, because menstrual issues are just cut across everything for the woman. It's a physical thing, it's a financial thing, it's an academic thing. So it's like the 4 days, the 2 to 5 days has everything to do. It can actually bring any woman to a standstill if they cannot afford and access whatever they need. And the alternatives are not, and there's no alternative. You just got to get the right instrument to be able to go through that specific. And if it's not done well, then we have 4 days every month from the time somebody begins their menses until 50 plus. Every day, every month, they have a period that they are looking forward, and they are just stressed, and they don't know what to do. So this affects a lot of how, and I think somebody mentioned it somewhere, the issue of leadership. Now, if this child starts their menses at 10 years, because it's now coming down to 10 years. So in the next maybe 5 years, every month they have a period where they're afraid of shame. People are sort of like would mock them, and they don't have the right instruments and gadgets to use. So that 4 days, they have low self-esteem. They might even not be in school. And so how are we going to develop them and make them leaders and be able for them to have self-confidence? Now, I'm just amazed, although sometimes who takes the responsibility? Because how much, Mheshimiwa, have people fought? Have the ladies in leadership already who are privileged, how much have they, I'm saying fought, because in Kenya it's like if you want to get anything done, you've got to sort of like really be strong, and you become the advocate, and sometimes you even get labeled by that. So call us the Mheshimiwa who is always talking about women things. So how much have we fought? Call them Mheshimiwa, are we willing to take on Uiwa menstruation? You know, so it's, and you remember I was a teacher for the better part of my life, taught across this nation, and if there's a school that does not have a welfare, that one of the things that makes the school start a welfare is to be able to at least find a way of getting sanitary towels for the girls. And getting the male teachers to even contribute to this welfare, they would always tell you it's a women thing. Now, how about when this teacher is the class teacher of a specific class? then they're saying, class teacher, I don't have anything to do with it. So that conversation needs to get back right from the basics and the family, where we still, amongst the families, like you say, they are 40, 45, those who are parents to, say, 15-year-olds, they could be 30, 35, so they grew up in that season where these conversations are not supposed to be talked about, and especially the men. But I give kudos to the men who can be able to talk about this and are comfortable. By the way, I stand in the supermarket and sometimes I see a male person, you know, purchasing sanitary towels, either for their daughters or for their spouses, I don't know, but they still need quite a bit of education. Like the one who bought diapers for the wife, because he was sent to buy sanitary towels. So he thought this is too small, so he bought diapers. This is an educated person. He thought this is too small, this cannot be what my wife uses. So all these years that they were together, how come he didn't know about the sanitary pads?
All right. Mheshimiwa, clearly there is need, because you talked earlier about, Mheshimiwa Pasaris, you talked earlier about this needs to be a multi-pronged approach, bringing the different players together, but also, as Megan pointed out, you can't use a sanitary pad without underwear, without panties, but also there's the issue of sanitation, disposal that you have all raised, even just knowing, because I read somewhere that 1 in 4 girls don't know, like you said, Megan, the linkage between when they start their menses, are ushered into womanhood, and pregnancy. They don't know. So where are some of the gaps, especially in the informal settlements? Mheshimiwa Pasaris, can you hear me?
Me?
Yes.
Yes. You know what? Yes. You know, you mentioned about the governor and his intervention. You know, one thing we'll need in all the schools is water. And then, of course, the same situation that you had in Brown, we need to make sure that there's good disposal of bins, you know, in the schools as well. And then we need extra toilets for the girls. Because at the end of the day, if you have 4 toilets for boys, 4 toilets for girls, you've got 2,000 students. At the end of the day, the girls are going to take longer if they are menstruating to change their pad, etc. You know, and then also maybe what we also need to make sure is we find out ways in which to also aid the environment, because you know, majority of the sanitary towels that we use are not biodegradable. How are we going to make sure that we are also coming up with cottons, you know? I mean, I think there's still quite a bit of synthetic in them, and Zana could be able to guide us on that. But all in all, as I said, we all need to put all hands on deck. We have to work together, and we need to do a proper evaluation, a proper study, monitoring and evaluation of where are we at. And then one of the biggest dangers that we have is our religious institutions. They completely refuse comprehensive sex education. And as long as we don't have comprehensive sex education, the young girl is shamed from talking about her menstruation with her family and her parents. So she goes and talks to the border who's taking her to school, because he notices and he sees a gap. From the street, he goes to buying her pads. He's compassionate. He understands. He cares about me. And before you know it, she's already been taken advantage of, defiled, and having a baby. So it's a vicious circle of wrongs. And I think that we really need to all come together. And that's why I really think having the media house behind this cause with this campaign, which I hope will be annual, and bringing more and more partners on board. And then, of course, you've got Janet. I mean, Janet is passionate for her. It's become her drive. And yeah, I just feel that, you know, even the wrong that happened in Brown, right, has been a right in that it's brought in awareness. People who didn't have systems to dispose of sanitary towels within their institutions are probably now doing it because they don't want to be in that space where social media will hit and attack. And they also want to be a bit more humane to women and the issues surrounding dignified menstruation.
All right. Mheshimiwa Muratha, I know we find it easier maybe to talk as women, among women, on the issue of menstruation. So I imagine even your constituents would find it easier to come and look for you behind the tent to express challenges around this, in this area. What is the situation like in Kiambu? How have you found it?
We're trying to maybe I would first say this, and maybe this will be some news to, not very news to Megan and Janet, who've done a lot of campaign on this thing. I was just checking on my social media, Facebook, and I have a very big following. I used to work for a vernacular station, radio station, and I have a huge following of close to 1 million. And every time I wake up in the morning and I put a statement, within 10 minutes, I have about 200 to 300 comments. But today, I've just put this poster. So the first person who comes there talks about the photo, says, you have a nice photo. Because whatever you are discussing is way out of what we like talking. And then the second person says, the program is lit. And let me tell you, when I wake up in the morning and I have nothing to say that day, and I just tell people, may the Lord bless you and give you a good day. Within an hour, I have 2,000 comments. But I can tell you today, since I posted this, that was around 6:30, at the moment, I still have 2 comments. Because to Kenyans, this is not a subject of discussion. When I went and put the statement in Parliament on the issue of the Browning, immediately I put the statement. The woman rep for Laikipia was pushing her card very hard to make sure the speaker is able to see. She's pushing her card and raising her hand so that she can put a statement. The same to the member of Parliament for Thika, who is a lady also. But to the men, and some of them I was seated with are from the same county, were telling me, because it is not our conversation. So the other day, I saw our governor, the governor for Kiambu County, launching very many sanitary towels around his office. And the first thing I heard from women is, why didn't he call the women to go and do it? Because this is not a man's business. These are not women feeling. And I also thought with them, I actually have now written and said, I also reasoned with them and I said, by the way, he should have called us. But again, now from the conversation we are doing, I said, this guy then was doing it right. Because now as a man, he was telling other men that this can also be our business. We can also try and see how we help our girls. But I can tell Janet and Megan, they really have tried to do it. But I can assure you, we still are way too far below what we want to discuss, because our community is still not taking this kindly. But thank God for these kinds of shows where it's a morning and people are still feeling this is a morning where we need to be talking about, you know, politics. Like if I woke up in the morning and I did something political, I said something about Mandamano, I would be having very many comments about Mandamano, because that's comfortable for us to discuss. So maybe what I would say is that we need to have more of this, where now you wake up on a breakfast show where everybody is expecting you to do politics, everybody is expecting you to talk about Baba, and to excite them, Baba was in a matatu, that is news. But when you want to sensitize people on this issue, no one wants to talk about it. As our councillor said, and he said it goes around so many other issues. When I went yesterday to the Brownie, they were telling me, the councillor who is there told me, that as he talked to the women and also the men there, he also realized there were so many underlying issues, not in the company, at home, that they're carrying together. And in the issue of the menstruation and the frustrations that they go through, they also drag in the issues that they are going through in families. And as she says, it is a whole load of other things that is being carried to the whole issue of menstrual cycle. And people are carrying baggages, and together with now the stresses that go together with the menstrual cycle. And there are no people to alert people that this is what is happening. There are people who will not know. There are men who will not know that it is at this moment that your wife gets irritated at the very small things that you do not understand. It is hurting marriages also. But because no one wants that discussion, even in church, you don't talk about such things, because menstruating women and breastfeeding women are unholy. They need to have a special place where they go and sit and discuss those things, but not where people are doing it. So I think Janet and Megan, who are big campaigners, I'll keep mentioning them because I've seen them doing it for many years. They not only now need to be here, they also need to come to churches and tell pastors, we have to just talk about this thing. And in the villages, we just have to talk about it. I think in Parliament, we come, let's discuss with Kewapa. You put your mind in the women in Kewapa, because to some people, when I'm comfortable, it's okay, I don't mind what happens to the other women. But I think it's a high time now we cross borders and say, and especially those people who do it passionately, like these ladies who feel, like Janet, who felt she doesn't want to be where you are. She wants to be out there. So these are the people we need to give opportunities. Like she meets the Kewapa and tells these are the Kenya women parliamentarians, and sits with them and tell them, it's a high time you start fighting strongly for this. I should give you the number of the chair lady of Kewapa, so that you tell her, I need to see these women parliamentarians, and tell them, you move this agenda to the next level. So that now, when the influence is also from all over, then we are able to see. Because one passionate person I see also about it in Parliament is Pasaris. And she will speak it anywhere. She will say it everywhere. She will tell the men on the corridors. And that's her. But to some of us, we are also reserved to other things. So I would welcome these ladies even to talk to Kewapa and tell us the agenda and the passion that pushes them to what they're telling us.
But it's also refreshing to have this kind of leadership. I don't know that you see it so often. And so I think it's the coming together of all of these minds that kind of allow for it to be prioritized. Because, you know, to Honorable Murada's point, and I think to Honorable Pasari, sometimes you'll still find in-house the people who don't want to embrace the issue. So you're still fighting a block. And to her point, we don't like to talk about these issues. Megan talked about being in Madara yesterday. It was the same thing with me a few months ago in Kariobangi, a lady who was saying she was 17, she had sex, she didn't know that was sex, but she ended up being a mom. She's now 23. But she's like, I didn't know what I was doing. And it always ends with, because nobody told me. So we're doing this thing about banning comprehensive sex education. Honorable Pasaris has just said it. We're really fooling ourselves. For me, it's really insane that we think censorship is going to protect. It's harming. Our teen pregnancy numbers are rising. HIV/AIDS among adolescent girls is rising because so they're getting their information from wherever they can. To Honorable Murada's point, we're all doing the best we can. But the censorship issue, because we think talking about sex will encourage people, no. Actually, the censorship is really hurting. And if you see countries in different parts of the world and you find how they are, you know, getting young people to access comprehensive sex education, sexual reproductive health and rights, you'll find that the numbers are lower because they're informed. Because when you're informed, you make a better choice. But when you're not informed and it's left to either we're not going to talk about it or listen, just abstain, we also can't be tone deaf anymore. You know, and that's one of the biggest issues now is there's not room to have very honest conversations about these issues, about our bodies, about our rights, about consent. So if people don't know about consent, then you're also seeing huge numbers around violations and rape and sexual harassment. So until we also at the very top, at leadership, have, you know, the intent to say, let's also invite the people who know what they're saying. Because, you know, see, there are people who are experts. Let's invite, Honorable Pasari said it, multi-sectoral approach. Everybody has their strength. We have leadership here. We have a psychologist. We have media and advocacy. We have somebody who's been in the space long enough to completely draw and combine all the dots. So how about we have all these minds together and form a way to make sure that this information trickles down, that products are accessible, but to Megan's point, there's also information beyond just the pads. It's about what's happening in your body, what's happening around you. But with the censorship, we've tried to go talk to schools also as Inuadada, and you talk about menstrual health and rights. You open up Q&A, everybody's hand goes up, and one girl says, okay, so how often am I supposed to take the P2? Literally, that's her first question. She's 13. And you want to engage, and you just see the teacher saying, don't even try. So I said, but she asked. You see, that was unprovoked. They know, they just don't have the right information. But again, they just feel helpless. They're like, we're not allowed to go too deep into some of these conversations. So that's another huge hindrance, is we need to have open, honest conversations within a safe space with experts, because then you're beginning to give agency to children. Children deserve agency. And then they grow into adults who make the right decisions and who also are not scared of buying pads or talking. There's a lot
But
more.
I would also want to say to Janet and Megan, like that when an opportunity arises, that we be on top of the game. Like now, I have requested the Brownie for them to keep the good relationship with the people of Rimuru constituency. Okay. They provide sanitary towels to the primary schools around Rimuru. So if we get the likes of people who passionately do this and now take that opportunity and talk to the girls, we would be more than open to such people to come to our constituency and talk to those girls now, take advantage of the situation that is here now and be on top of the game. So that at least now we know for Rimuru, we've done what we are supposed to do. Yeah. So, and we have worked with the Brownie. As they resolve their issue, we have taken the opportunity to also now get our girls sorted.
All right, so I need to take a break, but we will continue with the conversation on the other side.
In my shirt,
a toss of lavender and a world of freshness.
Wash your clothes with Toss Lavender to leave your clothes with a lasting, irresistible freshness.
As a mother, I have to do my duties in the house. It forces me to send her to the river because I have no alternative.
Otuo nikech pia ora. Otuo oko dhi school japuonj chunye chandore.
If children had water close by, they won't be sick, they won't be distracted because the water is clean.
I come from a family of 5 children, and I'm the last born in terms of boys. And I have 2 sisters who come after me. Just seeing them having to go through their period time without a pad. And so they had to resort to other means of finding pads or, of just surviving that phase. The pad center is a very special place for many young girls and women because we are the first pad center, I dare say, that any woman, regardless of your creed, your social status, or where you come from, can walk into a pad center and you'll be given a pad for free with no questions asked. And secondly, I've met a number of women who, in one way or the other, just because of a pad, they've been robbed of their dignity, and it has led to a lot of shame. Some of them in school, we know that there are girls who are staying away from school because a few weeks or a few days before they experience their periods, they'll stay away because they are avoiding accidents. And accident means that it can start without them having a pad or without them knowing.
Pata taarifa teke na e-paper. Stay in the know on the go. Getting the full story bilangori. To sign up, choose your preferred subscription. Use the promo code SUBZ22 to get 20% off and pay. Get your favorite newspaper and enjoy the truth anywhere, anytime. For inquiries, email epaper@ke.nationmedia.com or call 0790 111 111. Subscribe today and get your taarifa teke.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. And this morning we're discussing this. It is not unclean, period. Menstruation is natural. And dignity is a right. And with me in studio, or rather joining us virtually, we have Esther Pasaris, woman rep in Nairobi. She's joining us from Abidjan. We have Anna Murada, a woman rep Kiambu. Megan White Mukuria, founder Zana Africa Programs. Jaden Bugwa, founder Inua Dada Foundation. And Lois No, a psychologist. And Lois, I was coming to you next. So for a parent who is watching and they want to have this conversation with their child, where do you start?
That's one of the toughest questions, because parents ask it every other minute they're speaking to you, even late last night. So where do you start? Now, because like we have said before, no one spoke to many of the parents of now who need to speak to their children. So this whole thing there are certain things you must do with skills, otherwise it will fail. And as my colleagues were speaking, Janet and Meshimiwa, you know, I worked in a counseling institution and we used to do programs. And if there is any program that failed flat, was when you put up a parental guidance on sexuality. We could expect just 40, we would expect 2. So 2 register, we put the posters, we place everything, only 2. But when you talk about how to prevent drug addiction, the numbers would be very high.
Oh.
So it's just coming down to what are the skills, because we train, and personally I train parents. And when we train the parents, the biggest and the best space is basically the church setting, because every week there are hundreds of people gathered together to be able to be trained. But who is going to give you even 5 minutes in that setup to talk about issues of this nature? So there are things that we just need to train ourselves, get the skills to be able to talk about it, and get the courage and destigmatize ourselves. I don't know how people do that, but you need someone to help you, guide you, so that you also don't talk about it in a certain way, because the danger is you can talk about the sexuality in a way that raises the curiosity of that child, rather than giving them some information on values and the facts about their body so they appreciate. So that's the danger, and perhaps that's where we are a bit cautious when we talk about what is comprehensive sexual education. Will it create curiosity, or will it give facts so that people begin to appreciate their bodies and who they are? And I would not, I'm saying this with a lot of caution, because right now as we speak, the spiritual space has its statement on menstruation, whether they consider it, you know, there are certain things you can do when you are in this state, and they are all printed in the books of faith. And so how then are we going to help the women to stand up for themselves? Like I am also a priest, and what does it mean if maybe we are going to celebrate what we call the Holy Communion and I'm on my menses? Do I get to think about that, or do I go confidently as a woman and say, this is my duty and I've got to do it? So those conversations are very, very key. And skills is just the topmost of it. Speak to somebody who is already, you know, good in that space to help you to speak. Many times I have parents coming in with their children now, and we talk about it so that they know how to talk about it.
All right. You had something to add to that, Megan?
I would love to. I mean, first of all, in different scriptures, there are various versions of "we are fearfully and wonderfully made." Why do we insist on calling unclean that which God has blessed? He made us this way. Also, while it's about comprehensive sexual education, it's not. It's about child safeguarding. It's about consent. It's about your own body and yourself and what is happening. When boys are having unexpected erections, we don't call that about sexuality. It's just a thing, right? But suddenly because we're bleeding, it becomes sexualized, right? When I was in Mathare yesterday and I was saying, we need to talk about our body parts. We need to name our body parts. We need to teach our kids what they are and how they shouldn't be touched inappropriately, right? And to tell your parent if they are touched inappropriately. I said, in Kenya, you know, the average age that it starts is 5 years old. And the mother stood up and said, no, it starts at 2, right? There are men defiling children regularly, and women defiling boys too. That happens also. Okay, let's not just say men. But the majority, yes, at age 2 years old, men inappropriately touch children. Fathers, stepfathers, uncles, shopkeepers, the whole works. When we sexualize this, we take away the consent and the safeguarding that is our sacred duty. And so we have to tell kids about their bodies, about what's normal, about how to keep themselves safe and how to speak up when things are not safe. And menstruation is just about you and your body. It's not about you and your interaction with anybody else. And I think that that's really important to recenter, right? So what we are doing with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is readapting our reproductive health and life skills curriculum into the CBC curriculum from a life skills and safeguarding perspective, because that's where it starts. We can continue to have debates about whether youth are having consensual and non-consensual sex, whether or not they should be allowed to have contraceptives or not, but it starts with safeguarding, and it starts with your body and what's normal, and how to speak up when things are wrong, right? 1 in every 10 women has a significant problem with fibroids or endometriosis or something, but women are told, just be strong, suck it up, you're a woman. But actually, it's a medical issue that needs surgery, right? So it's all that shame and stigma is all entangled, and at the end of the day, kids are suffering, and it's very easy as a parent to just talk about it. And we have tools at Zana Africa. We also have tools for, you know, companies. We did a research project with USAID. For companies, every 100 shillings invested in menstrual health and reproductive health education, which is really gender equity, returned 154 shillings, right? Women rushed to work to go get products at work when they started their period. They didn't call in sick, right? At Thika Cloth Mills, which was one of the participants, they used to have to close their production line on Saturday evening, right? After the year of intervention, they closed on Friday nights. Still paid everybody the same, but exceeded their targets. Because this matters for bottom lines, it matters for society, it matters for industry. The US ambassador recently was saying that if Kenya needs to achieve some of its goals over time, we need to grow at 8% per year because of the population growth, right? We can do that by investing in menstrual health. Starting with primary schools. If Brown Shoes can donate to schools, awesome. The government can do it, awesome. But we need to do it as all of society, and any business person who's paying attention to this show, anybody. It matters for bottom lines, it matters for safety, it matters for long-term outcomes, and gender equity is everybody's issue. So parents, there are ways to talk about it, but it just starts with just normalizing, hey, we bleed every month from our uterus if there's no baby. It's totally normal, right? My 6-year-old daughter was in Mathare giving out pads yesterday, right? They're normal, and we just need to like lower the inflammation around it.
I really like what she said about it's really about you and your body. My 7 and 5-year-old son, they know to raise an alarm if anybody does anything inappropriate, because that's the conversation we've had. When children don't know, we create a society that brings us to these conversations. And so, to her point, whichever institution, corporate, religious, we really need to, and it is disturbing, this sexualization around bodies from a very young age. And by the way, like policies in places like Florida, you know, they're trying to introduce, they're trying to introduce policies where you're not allowed to talk about periods. So why are you policing?
What?
No, didn't they say that?
Yeah, the governor of Florida was trying to ban, I mean, they're already banning books and all this stuff. The US is like really having a bad moment that's been there for a really long time. But yeah, they don't want people to talk about menstruation because you're talking about sex.
Yeah.
And we can't talk about sex. God forbid.
God forbid. And it's really dangerous, I think. And we need to take stock. We need to look at ourselves in the mirror, because I get this conservative and all of this, but you're doing more harm than good. Censorship around periods, around sex, around our bodies, like I said, if it's done within a safe space, if it's just normalized, it also creates somebody growing up knowing, I'm normal, there's nothing wrong with me. If I feel the urge, if I'm feeling something, it's science, by the way, but it's really demonized. And when it's demonized, you end up harboring or projecting in really dangerous ways. The levels of incest and abuse in certain places in this country they're so raw and so terrifying that I'm like, the fact that this is not the national conversation is disturbing. And it's because it goes round to this vicious cycle of censorship and saying, let's keep it under wraps. I consider myself a moderate left because I can talk about sex and sexuality all day, every day. I'm also faith-based, but I've known not to get those twisted. Like, I think it's important for people, even in faith, to step out and say, let's protect our own, let's inform our people, let's talk to our children, let's talk to our families. I think it's really, really important. And the opposite of doing that...
like talking about the sinful things. Because when you talk about sexuality in our community, a lot of sexuality, you are a sinner. You're considered a sinner. And somebody who really has not gotten properly converted. Because when you talk about it, you
hasn't
like,
been delivered.
Yes, you need deliverance because every time Janet speaks, she talks about sex, she talks about menstruation. I don't know at what point we're going to penetrate and tell people this is just, it's just like how we have saliva in our mouths and such like things. I don't know how we're going to do it for people to understand it in that perception. Because now when Janet keeps talking about such things, and Megan, these ladies are more sinners.
They're bad.
They don't look godly. They don't sound very godly.
And it also starts with working with
Let
community
them tell us
allies.
about going to heaven. But when they start talking about such ungodly issues,
We might menstruate.
we are lost somewhere. I don't know how we open that conversation, but we just have to.
Mheshimiwa, sorry if you're willing to share. I'm curious how you came to learn about periods when you were young girls. I remember I was in school, primary school, and we had, always there was the thing. You know that you associated sudden, when you think margarine, you think bluebird or sanitary towels always. And they came and the girls were called into a room. I think I was in class 7 or 8, I can't recall. And they explained how to use sanitary towels. So I didn't hear about periods from my mother. I heard it, I learned about it in school. And I was so excited when I got my period because I was like, now I get to use this thing. Because they had handed out the sanitary towels and such. So I was very excited. But I remember I did stain myself the first time and I was like, okay, what happened? But Mheshimiwa Pasaris, if you don't mind sharing, if you're comfortable sharing, what was your experience like? And as a mother of, you have is it one daughter or? How,
a daughter, yes.
A daughter, yeah. How did you broach the subject with her?
Okay, first of all, I mean, in our time, we had cotton wool, the traveling cotton wool, I used to call it. You put it on, but my goodness, from morning till evening, it travels from the back to the front. And so we didn't have sanitary towels that was stuck, with glue, so they stayed in place. But so I mean, my mother kind of talked about it, but not directly. I learned it a bit in school, but the traveling cotton wool, of course, I always stained my skirt. So, for me, I would turn the skirt round and round and round because I didn't have another skirt to change to go to school. So, of course, the embarrassment was there. My daughter, I came home and she comes to me and she goes, oh, Mom, I got my period. And I was, oh, my God, babe, let's talk. And she goes, Mom, I know everything, okay? I got the pads from your room and I'm okay. Don't worry, don't make a big drama about it.
All right.
Mr. Google. So Mr. Google gave her the education. But the thing is, I think, there's something that Janet mentioned about her children knowing about good touch, bad touch. It's so important. The fact that our children got pregnant, over 300,000 children got pregnant during the pandemic, teenage children, minors, that shows us that we do have a crisis. Lois, no, I mean, I just wanted to know that, we seem to always talk at each other rather than with each other. And what's happening is, I know that we had the Psychologists and Counselors Act that was passed, but it took until somewhere around 2020, when I went into 2021, actually, when we had mental health issues because of COVID. And I went to see Mutahi Kagwe and I said, look, you've got the Psychologists and Counselors Act. I've been made aware of it. Can we implement it? And he put a board together. So, I mean, I think when we start talking with each other, we will solve some of these problems. And we've got to talk to church leaders. And, when Megan talks, she's talking with broad experience. But you know, some people will look at her and say, "Oh, she's just white, bringing us white culture, white issues." But the thing is, Megan's Kenyan as any other Kenyan. So when we talk, we should start stereotyping and making it look like these are Western ideas, Western ways, because we've got to move in with the time. We can't choose to be Western when we want to and not Western when we don't want to. Our culture, it was mentioned that we used to talk about these things before, and now we don't. So I think, you know, all hands on deck. And really, I can't say it enough about Nation Media Group, and make this campaign of yours really, really hit the ground with it. And we as women reps will do our best. And I love my sister, the woman rep of Kiambu. And, you know, the fact that she has looked at this whole thing objectively and said, look, this incident happened, but this is a company make sure survives, thrives, continues employing the people, and continues serving the community. So, you know, the whole idea is when we have a problem and we have dialogue and we find solutions, we grow stronger. You know, we can't always be at each other's throats.
Mm. All right. Yes.
Earlier on than what we are doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still, like what you asked, there was such comprehensive education on the biological processes that we had to go through, although it was for girls. The boys, I don't know why they ignored them. And, you know, Honorable Pasaris has brought those memories of cotton wool. Mm. There was such, in fact, I still remember there was a teacher who used to tell us the challenge is this will travel, it will move. So there is a way in which you need to think about the underpant that you're putting on during this time. It's got to be tight enough. And so that you are comfortable. And then even tell you, you've got to do your petticoat, you know, during this time, and maybe put on two so that in case they stain, it gets onto the first one. And I thought that was, you know, amazing. And then if the responsibility was given to someone else, if I can speak, rather than hush and shut up, you'd rather then give it to someone else who is comfortable to speak about it and maybe listen to how they're doing it. Because many times we were gathered together and my older aunties would speak about it. I learned it from my auntie because it was, you know, in our culture, I think we are a little bit better. You're sent. You know, your mother doesn't want to talk about it because she's very spiritual. She's in the Mothers Union. She's very holy. So take to this auntie, and you know, the one who is less spiritual to talk to you. But they spoke. Yeah, but they spoke. But they spoke, and they made us, they made us to be able to speak about it now. Yeah.
Okay. Mheshimiwa Murad, I'm curious if you're willing to share. What was your first experience?
Just like she's saying, my mother was Mothers Union, very spiritual, of the Tukutendereza movement. Those of you who know what Tukutendereza was about, that was a no-go zone. She never talked about it. She never mentioned it. But when it came over to me, it was those times also of those cotton wools. And I had to ask her for it. And she told me to go to a certain lady's shop and ask her to give it to me, and then she will go and pay. And many other times, she would not want to discuss that. She would not want to go through that discussion. I still miss she lived long, so that I would ask her now that I'm of age, what was very strange about discussing it. Unfortunately, she never lived long. She died at 50, and where I am now, and she never lived, because if it's now, she would be around 80, and I would be asking her what was very strange about it. Fortunately, about my daughter, I have a daughter who has just turned 18. And the time I wanted to open up that conversation with her, she was like, "Mom, you are late. The teacher has already talked about it." So you already late. So I was no better than my mother, because I was thinking it's still a bit early to talk about it. But the day I told her, now we need, you know, it's something you really want to first warm up and see where to start and how you go about it. And I was like, okay, come. I want us to discuss. When I started it, she was like, "Oh, Mom, you are late. The teacher has already spoken about it." And I didn't know the teachers are speaking about it so early at class 3. Yeah. I thought she was still very young. Yeah. But then she told me, "I am already aware." So I told her, do you know these always things on TV and everything? She said, I even have some. The teachers gave us. I have some in my wardrobe.
Yeah.
We've only have not seen them. So I was like, oops, I'm already late. But and today I want to open conversations with her, such that sometimes she would come and ask me, do you have any sanitary pads? Me, I have not bought any. And I think that now gives me that idea of we can talk about it. And the other day she was telling, she found some sanitary towels in my room and she asked me, Mom, you still are using these things that I said? Why not? I said, umezeka, hujachoka na hii miaka yote. So when she opens up that conversation, then I feel we need to talk about it. But then I ask myself, how many, to some of us of my generation, I'm sure if your daughter would say that, it's like, nisiwahi sikia ukiongea vitu kama hizo tena wewe. Usiwahi niuliza vitu kama hizo. But now to me, I'm finding it fun that we can now talk about it. And she opened the conversation and now I'm able to pick it. But I can tell you, it's a conversation to a majority of our women. I don't know, it's something that is not spoken. Because especially to those of us who are in the Christian faith, there's something that is very sinful about it, and it's not acceptable. Yeah. Even when we have conferences, you hear women keep asking, Ati, I have a question. Is it advisable to come to church when I'm on my periods? I'm like, I thought we settled that once and for all. And we said it's life. Yeah. But you see, it's still a question to a majority of us. And that's why I'm saying, and also to those of us who are in politics also, when Janet wants to come to my constituency and start pecuaring that there are girls there who have these issues, politically I'm feeling she's beating me, so I want to deny. Yeah. We are good, we have no problem. We are good, and especially those constituencies that maybe are not doing very good. So maybe what I would say is that if we push our men to first start now embracing the whole conversation and owning it up for their wives, for their daughters and their sisters and such like things, then maybe I can confess that we still have a long way to go. But we thank God that there are people who are still moving along with it. I can tell you the passion these ladies move it around is not my passion. And I'm a woman. I would not go talking. By the way, I'm known to be a boy child campaigner. So I talk a lot on the boy and how the boy has been left behind. And I'm wondering who is going to marry these girls. So when I'm seeing these women champion also getting dignified women for the boys that I'm speaking for, then I will really advocate that we really support them, so that they can wholeheartedly go speak about it. When I speak in churches and I want to speak about the marriage bed and the holiness of the marriage bed, you realize there are pastors and church elders who will feel, don't go to the details, just ongea tu hapa juu. We have a culture that really demonizes biology. It is demonic, and I don't know who will demonize it now to churches and to help our pastors and churchmen to also believe it's part of life. That's why they are there, because it happens sometimes. I don't know, but I'm sure we will get somewhere.
There's something Megan had talked about earlier about the age groups and how traditionally, like, you know, like the circumcision, the boys would be taken away and they'd be brought up and informed and taught on, you know, the changes in your body and all of that. Did that happen with the girls, maybe the aunties?
Yeah, that was the work of the aunties in most of the cultures, so that older woman. And I think it was much better. But currently, I can at least appreciate the spiritual space where now the transition is both for girls and for boys. So then finally, they conclude for the boys with circumcision, and they conclude with the girls with the certificate of transition as well. And I'm glad, because the uptake is good enough, but it is only in the urban areas. It's only in the urban areas. True. And if you start that program, maybe in the rural, deep rural, it might not even take off. And particularly, like we're saying, where we still have, basically, Megan, it's interesting. The reason why we still have a lot of challenge with women in the leadership of the church and hierarchy has to do with, you know, this issue of how will they preach, how will they lead when they are menstruating. It's sad, but that's the reason. So in the rural areas, you find quite a majority are men, and they might only drive the men agenda. You know, it's interesting on how sometimes even the educated, you know, people who are leading, you know, groups of people every week, we have, like I said, 500, 600 coming in, gathering, that somebody could still be praying to deliver, you know, boys because of they have the what do we call it? The erection that is natural, that is telling, letting them know that they are okay, that their biological processes are good. But someone was praying for them, you know?
I feel like that's a huge misinterpretation, and I feel like that's so harmful that a lot of these things which are, like she mentioned, it's fearfully and wonderfully made. The things that speak to me about faith are really kind and have empathy, it's love, it's understanding, but it can always be weaponized, and I think a very big way it's weaponized is against women and girls, and I think that needs to be checked, because then it becomes something else when that happens.
Because women, this is an issue of agency over our body.
Yes.
And because I'm looking at the clock and we have very few minutes left, I'll allow Mheshimiwa Pasaris, on account of to save your bundles, to have the last word before I hear from Megan and as well as Janet.
I love your catchword. It's not unclean, period. It's so amazing. It grounds the conversation, dignity, humor, as girls and women, consent. I mean, there's so many beautiful things that have come out of this conversation. And I really feel that as a society, we've got to come together and embrace womanhood as a gift, not a curse.
All right, thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Janet, your last word on the subject. Interesting, we're talking about our first time.
Yeah, first time. Yeah. My first time was when I was 10, and I learnt about it when I woke up and saw blood on my bed. I've talked about it in the book. It was traumatic, but Mom was very quick to be like, wear these pads and don't let boys touch you. Literally, those were her 2 words. And then later on, my dad was congratulating. My dad's a feminist, by the way. So, and later, I was so grossed out. I'm like, why does he know, Mom? Why did you tell him? Because I didn't know. But anyway, it ended well. But last word is, I think this is an opportunity to turn the page on how we treat menstrual justice in this country, how we treat women and girls, how we talk about gender equality. There are a lot more male allies in the space, by the way. I think Honorable Murada she said it right. We do need, but we also need them to really, really own it, to her point. In fact, it's something my dad said the other day. He's like, men just need to be louder. Men who want better for us or better for women need to be louder about it. Yes, we can we know it's our issue, we get it, but it's important that we have allies across the board. Men, people who are older, community champions. When everyone is included, everyone wins. I wish people understood that. So we need to have a lot of empathy, a lot of advocacy, a lot of activism. We need to bring everyone to the table. We haven't even talked about how menstrual health affects people who are differently abled. We haven't talked about how it affects people who are incarcerated. It's a massive issue. So it's about inclusivity, it's about empathy, it's about understanding, and it's about really being intentional and pushing for justice, because honestly, we're 50% or maybe more of this world. I don't know how our issues don't matter as much, but that needs to really, really change. So we'll do the best we can through our own organizations. As in Wadada, we train women, we speak to them. We do Tandika Leso, which is really about what they were saying, and what Megan was alluding to, reclaiming, sitting down and having conversations like they were way back when. And so my final word is just, can we turn the page now? We're talking, I think this is for me, it's very encouraging to see a group like this come together. So can we strengthen that? Can we form a coalition that allows this agenda to continue? Can we not slow momentum? And can we get support from every single agency and institution? It may be a process, but we're willing to put in the work. But let's have people also have empathy and invite everyone to the conversation. So
all right.
More on Saturday.
Okay, so I'm so time bad, Megan. 30 seconds if you can.
That's fine. I think we need to move from saying we need to talk about this to we are talking about it and we're not going to stop. So part of that will come on Saturday. We'll say more. Talk to us at niayangu.co.ke if you're a company or a school or well-wishers. We have solutions. We're not the only ones. There are many, many, many. But let's keep the conversation going for systemic change and for gender equality, because there's nothing short of full gender equality that this conversation starts.
All right. And speaking of gender equality, it turns out it is World Population Day, and that is the theme. As Janet said, we'll get into how this affects incarcerated women, persons with disability on Saturday. Safari Park tickets are still on sale, 3,500 shillings individuals, corporate 100,000. Support the conversation, changing cycles. Kwa gazeti ya leo, you can find it in today's Daily Nation. Thank you so much, ladies.
From Kiambu, we say that we want to say that all things work out together for good for them that love the Lord. Somebody had to misbehave at the Brownie so that we get enough sanitary towels for all the Rimuru children.
All right.